Hello, good evening and welcome to my Liverpool Life, our third instalment of this show, and I'm delighted this week to be joined by Mr. Karl Coppack. Karl, how are you?
Not bad, mate, not bad at all.
Excellent. Karl,
it's a lovely week to lift a trophy, isn't it?
Well, this is it, we should all be happy, we should all be smiling, and yeah, it's a long time, but you're the man that can tell us about previous trophy lifting escapades, and something that's a lot of us, well, I was a kid when we last won it, but I do remember the time, but a lot of fans won't remember what it was like to be part of a winning machine, and I know you certainly do remember those times, and we're going to talk about those times. So we're going to, just for the listeners there, this is just going to be a show talking to guests about their love of the Reds, what got them into Liverpool, their favourite moments, favourite memories, and just sort of leading through that, just to talk about their love over the years of all things Liverpool. So I want to go back in time to 1981. It's a different time. Charles marries Diana. There's racial tension with the Toxic riots, and Yozza Hughes is going around asking anyone who listened to give a job. But it's also the very first time that you go to the match. Is that right, yeah. Karl? What do you remember of that?
My first game was November 1981, so it would have been my 13th birthday. If people are thinking that's a bit late to go to the match, isn't it? And it really was in those days. My family are blue, and my dad, he didn't have a hatred of Liverpool. It was just sort of, no, I'll take you to Goodison, but I'm not going to take you to that place. So I went with my mate Chi. Long story why it's called Chi, and he was still my mate. Literally, the last person I spoke to tonight was my mate Chi. So we went. We were both 30 in that month, and we went to see the European champions play Southampton at Anfield. I want to say it was about the 25th of November, and it was just before my birthday. And Anfield was much different. It was a horrible pitch. I think there might have been a bit of sand around the place. If anyone's of my vintage, they might remember it was the time when Southampton, they were a decent side. They had all the old England captains. And more importantly, it was the time that Kevin Keegan came back to Anfield. Yeah. And there for the first time. And they had that great Patrick kit. With everyone had the Patrick boots on with the two white stripes down the sides at the back, which didn't, they were never going to rival Adidas in my school, but it was all right to wear them. Yeah, you're okay. It wasn't a wall thing to be wearing Patrick, and it was a game, and Liverpool were terrible. Liverpool were absolutely abject. Oh, we lost 1-0.
We lost 1-0. Who scored? Do you remember?
Right, Steve Moran, who was later involved in a rape accusation.
Oh, so, bad day all round, I think.
If you're going to remember one thing, it might as well be that. But yeah, they had Mick Mills, Keegan, they had Dave Watson, not the Everton player, the one who played for England before them. That sort of thing. We had the classic midfield, and I was in the Kemlin nearer the corner flag of the Anfield Road, I'd say. And the seats were horrible, sort of grey wood. Very much a different ground in those days. Yeah, with Bob Paisley sort of never leaving his dugout, the other side of the ground. Yeah, it does feel as long ago as that sounds.
I know, and that's the thing. It does. It seems like another world, doesn't it? And when you see the footage of that era, it looks like another world. But it was a glorious period for Liverpool. You said they're the reigning European champions. But 81, 82, there was big changes in the team then, wasn't there? Because even though some of the guys were in the reserves, you had sort of Ian Rush was coming into the fold. Bruce Grobbelaar, I think, comes in that season.
The cop sang "I, Brucey" that day.
Yeah,
I remember that really clearly. Yeah, not for very long because they were still trying it out. It was Grobbelaar's first season, I think. Yeah,
well, that he'd come in and he'd I think he hadn't overly impressed her. There was a few hairy moments, which I think would define Brucey as he went through the years. And anyway, but I think when you're taking over from, I suppose, Clem after so many years, and you get
the greatest Liverpool goalkeeper as he was in those days,
and you get a bit of an eccentric guy like Brucey. I suppose it was a big change. But was that the year they started and were were poor up until Christmas and then came back in the second half of the season. Was that the season?
81, 82? Yeah, I think it was actually. Yeah. I mean, I think that was, from what I can remember, it wasn't a great time for us. Certainly, I remember Ipswich were coming through a lot at that time as well. They had John Walker and Eric Gates and people like that around that side. And I remember going home and sort of not disappointed as such, but not really feeling surprised by that. Where I was going later in the mid-80s, I'll never forget there was a time when I was on the cop waiting for the team to come out, and I remember thinking for the first time, what happens if we lose? And I honestly hadn't considered that as an option at all. It was go to the cop, and the worst thing that's going to happen is a 1-1 draw. Yeah, and that sort of thing. But I think in 81, 82, there was a sense of no, I think that was the year before actually when we were on. No, you're right. It was Boxing Day 81 where we lost against Man City, I think. I'm going to look it up now.
It probably was, I suppose, if they'd made a lot of the changes, the new lads had come in, it was probably accounted for the slower start. But like I said, they were replacing some good players.
Ray Kennedy, Jimmy Case, Ray and Jimmy were going that season. I think
was
actually,
about to go there.
There's the first reference to him. I think that might have been Ray Kennedy's last home game. I think I looked it up once and I started to look it up, but sort of didn't believe it because that'd be too much of a coincidence that I only ever saw him once and it was his last game. I say because my family were blue. I had to make it with kick-off on ITV on a Sunday and match of the day when we were on, which don't forget in those days showed second division games as well.
So you're not getting a full highlights package on that.
No, I remember I was talking to Mike Nevin about this recently and saying Radio Merseyside and Radio City used to do this thing where they would at 3:00 the game would kick off and then they'd announce what the second half commentary was. And it was usually whoever was home, like or saw Everton. And there's also when we used to go to the game in those days as well, there was it's just ridiculous when you think about it now. You go sort of for the main stand, sort of the cop corner, and you see the big massive BBC vans and think, we're on Match of the Day tonight. And that was a treat.
Yeah.
Because we weren't always on Match of the Day. They showed one game for about 10 minutes and then they talked about it for 20 or whatever. And then we weren't always on Match of the Day. League and European champions, let's remember, not always on Match of the Day because Tottenham might be playing Chelsea.
Yeah.
And they make that Match of the Day. So that was what the times were like in those days. So if you look back at that Southampton 81 game, it is on YouTube. And it looks like the Zapruder film. Honestly, it looks like it's really shaky and grainy and everything. Yeah. I'm not that old. But it's just like in 1981, it looks like some bloke's done it on a cine camera somewhere in the paddock. It is a long. But that was a weird season because you've also got to remember this is the time when we're just about to see off Forest.
Yeah.
They've just obviously, Forest are European Cup winners. Villa have just won the league as well. They're coming through with Peter Widd, who's a Scouser, which is also slightly annoying as well. At that time, they've got a former United goalkeeper in goal and Jimmy Rimmer and things like that. So, but we had Souness, and that's what I remember more about Enethos because it doesn't matter. We got Souness, and Souness just won everything.
Yeah, we spoke on a show there recently about Souness, and look, I didn't see peak Souness, but my family are big Reds and would have been huge fans of Graham Souness. And we were saying, people of a certain generation don't understand. They know Suey the commentator, but they don't know Souness the player. And he was everything in the midfielder, wasn't he? Rolled into one. He was keen plus goals. He could play ball and he could put the foot in as well. He was an unbelievable player, and you would have been lucky to be right there. True. What the Souness signs in 78? Is it up to 84?
78 up, yeah.
84. So you're getting
the
peak years. So you touched on it there. Your father was a Blue, and you're 13 years old there, going to your first game. So after that, is it regular games or is it sort of just here and there? You're just going to a game a year, maybe.
The odds went up. I remember I went to see we played QPR in about 83 or something. And I remember going to that. I can't remember the score. It was the odd one every now and then. Because my mates went, but they went with their dads.
Yeah.
And they went in the stand. I wanted to go on the cop, and we weren't old enough to go on the cop. And that's how the old days where you go on the paddock, then you go on the cop, and we didn't do that in those days. So I sort of had to wait till basically till I'd left school. So I was doing like the odd 1 or 2 games a season, always Anfield, never away. And until about 85, 86, then I basically got a grant. I got a student grant, and the match was cheap. You know, it was $250 to get in. So, you know, as long as you got there early, you were going to the match.
Yeah.
But no, it's not like now, you know, where, you know, you've got to basically plan months in ahead and, you know, book things. So, but, you know, in those days, it was pretty much a case of, if you've got money, you're going in. I just didn't bother going in because basically I couldn't afford it as well. You know, and also that was around the time, of course, when I started discovering albums, and I had a paper round, and therefore I remember, God, I really, really sounded old man, Icky, but I remember the Jam released the Snap compilation in about 1983 or something like that, and it was £6, and it cost me 3 weeks pocket money to join. I'm starting to sound like my granddad. I don't want to do this. I'm going now. But I remember saving up to buy an album. Saving up to buy an album, and you know that was what it was like. And in those days, if it was that or go the match, it was one or the other. I'd spend my money on the match, or I'd spend my money on music in general. And
it wasn't a case of doing both. And again,
no, it's definitely one or the other. Definitely,
and that's something, like I said, nowadays people will take for granted. You know, it's it's a different era. You go to the match or you buy our records. But pop culture was a big thing back then as well, because you had terrace sort of culture and, you know, the casual culture, which Liverpool were sort of at the forefront of at the time. So you're talking about all the branded clothes that they're going to Europe, they're coming back, they're wearing all the brands. Was that something that you were involved in at that time, or was it something you didn't really pay too much heed to, you know, the clobber and all that?
It's funny you should say that, because to be honest, yes and no, because I like the Jam, I like the style cancels, therefore I quite like the mod stuff. So I wasn't really into Sheeny or Feel or anything like that. But I said this to Mike Nevin recently. My school was if Liverpool Education Authority. They should have put it on the forms, like, you know, your son has been accepted into the school. Please bearing in mind that the very minimum is Adidas Samba. That's otherwise you're not coming in. Adidas Samba, very, very minimum to come in to this school. So I remember about 81-ish, everyone had one of the three, Bamba, Samba, or Mamba. You had to have one of those three, even if you weren't into that sort of thing. Even the kids who just weren't into that sort of thing, they had to have Adidas shoes. And, you know, all school uniforms and everything, but the teachers didn't care about the shoes because no formal shoes because, you know, trainees were fine. So there was always that element of it going on all the time. But I can remember, like, you know, what the terrace culture is like all the time, you know, sort of the two-tone Adidas jackets and stuff like that. And, you know, even Puma made a late entrance in the 80s, early 80s, because Kenny Dalglish wore them. And these are important things. You know, there's no replica kits in those days. No one did any of that at all. But, you know, if you wore Puma Dalglish boots, then you were the man. Absolutely, you know, to play a game of footy with your mates, because they cost, you know, they were over 20 quid. God, I am sounding like my granddad now. Well, I am not that old, I promise you, I'm not that old.
A few of the lads in the chat there are feeling this. Kev O'Sullivan says, God, this is how I sound at times as well. And
I'm really sorry, Kev.
Avo saying Mr. Coppack is of my era. So we do have a few lads in here that will remember all this stuff very well. So look, it's something that was, when you look back at that era, it is a big sort of part of it. And it leads in, so you've sort of gone semi-regular then to the match, but what was it, 85, 86 when you start?
85, 86, I'm planning Saturdays now.
Yeah.
At that age, that was a big thing, and it was always the same routine, and it's changed these days, but there's still certain things I do. I've still got the so what I'd do, my mate Chi and I would go to the Kop. We'd go in at the main stand Kop corner flag end into that, and I would go about halfway into the Kop, not quite to the sort of the left goal post of the Kop, facing towards the end, road end, and about, I'd say, a third of the way down. A third of the way closest to the pitch. That was where I'd start anyway. And you know, everyone wants to stand in front of the turnstile because, you know, anyone who stands behind one hasn't been to that ground before. That's a really, really easy way to get crushed. And you know, so that's where you'd start. And of course, these were the days when, if anything happened and you moved your shoulder, 60 lads would run past you because you're holding them up without you realizing it. And I do miss that sort of thing. But even then, I still do the same things now that I did then, I've got two superstitions, and they're ridiculous. They're absolutely ridiculous. I can't look at the pitch until I'm at my seat or when I was standing on the Kop. I'll always look down, then I'll look at the pitch. Don't know why. And I never ever sing the first verse. We Can Have Walk Alone.
Just the first verse.
Just the first. Never ever done it ever. But I think that's also because I have to wait till we decide what key we're doing this week. because by the second verse kicks in, then it's when you walk through a storm. So it goes either or. So by the second verse, right? I know what we're doing now, right? I can do this now.
Wait until you're comfortable, and then you can. Jump
I like to come
there.
in. Yeah. I said I told that to Paul Matron once, and he said, "Well, it's like Westlife, like finger in the air, standing off the stool, ready to join in." That's pretty much what I'm like, and and I've been doing that since 1985.
Excellent. So you're what, 17 at that stage, is it?
About 17, yeah.
About 17. So it's I suppose the adulthood there. 17-year-old back in 1985 isn't like a 17-year-old now. It's
it literally is. What pub can you get served in?
Yeah.
That's the most important thing about your Saturday. Where can I get served?
Yeah, and that's it. And that's all part of the match day sort of routine, isn't it? You're going, you'll get a point, you'll get off to the match. 1985, obviously, we'll take it down a bit here. 1985, Heysel happens, and you start going the following season. Is it just Anfield, or were you going to aways as well at that stage?
No, I wasn't. I was pretty much. I remember the odd trip to Man City.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't like nothing as regular as I am now, but it was. No, not really. I remember I went in '88 to Man City in the Cup and got hit by a 2-pence piece. I remember that really clearly, and didn't mind, which is even weirder. But no,
part of the experience, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was around. So that season, Kenny's first season, it was in the air. Heysel was always in the air because no matter how much you say yes, but people died, and it was always the sense of like we can't defend that. And it maddens me when people like saying, "Oh yeah, you're never contrite about Heysel or anything like that." Yeah, we fucking were. Yeah, we really were.
That's one of the worst things, I think, is the sort of point scoring that people look for and throw out Heysel like without knowing a single thing about Heysel or about Liverpool fans. It's an easy weapon to beat them with. But you're there in the thick of it. Post Heysel, you're going to the game. Was there any sort of animosity? Now, I suppose at Anfield, maybe not as much, but could you sense the animosity from the rival fans, or were you far enough away that you wouldn't have been?
Pretty much too far away. So basically, in those days, the away end was the Anfield Road / Kemlyn corner, and it really was just that corner. Of course, it's all standing, so they can get as many people in. So it's the other side of the alley road where they are now. And they're just too far away, and it's mostly your shit, that sort of thing. It's nothing heavy at that point. It's these are the days when some people in the chat might remember that it was when they used to have the big tin on the pitch. Before people might remember that before Liverpool came out, that there was a sign of they had like an oversized Crown Paints tin on the pitch. And I don't think anyone ever bought a Crown Paints product just because that was on the pitch. But it happened all the time. It was just weird.
Yeah, I'm sure a few of the lads in the chat will remember that well. As I said, there's a few of them are of that vintage. So you're going to the game 85-86. So as you touched on there, it's Kenny's fourth season. He's player manager at that stage. He's still, I don't know how many games he plays that year, but I think he does. He's still quite regular, isn't he, in that season?
He comes in because Paul Walsh gets injured,
yeah. So he plays a lot of games, but Rushy is banging in goals. And we go, there's Avo there. He says he remembers it well. So, I knew there'd be a few of them that'd remember this. But you're going to the match regular now, 85-86. Could you sense what Kenny was going to do, or were you a bit unsure? A young player coming in as a player manager. What did you make of that at the time, the appointment? Was it an interesting one to you, or was it just a natural, this will work because Liverpool were just a winning machine?
Well, it was rumoured that to be Phil Neal.
Yeah.
For a while, and obviously Phil Neal didn't like the fact he didn't get it.
Yeah.
But of course, what is more important is Kenny could do no wrong. Yeah. And until in my age, I'd never ever seen Kenny Dalglish make a mistake in his life. And you just think, and I remember there was a documentary that came out about Kenny's first season, and Ronnie Moran said, and God, I adore Ronnie Moran, just came in and said, Kenny comes in, and his words were, he goes through the mill like the other players, and if he needs any help, he's got to put Bob Paisley up the corridor. He was advising him in his first season. So I was sort of, we've won the league.
Yeah.
Because, Ronnie Brand said so. Brand says so. Bob Paisley's up the road. Then all he's got to do is say yes again and just do it like that. And, Kenny was disagreeing with him at that point. And then, of course, the big difference with Kenny as a player is he really did lose a yard that year, obviously, because he's got so much going through. He can't train as much as anyone else, you'd think. And he's getting older. So, when he scores goals, it's a big deal. When he scored the first goal at Goodison in the 3-2 win, and you just think, A, it's a derby. B, it's a really aggressive derby because it's them. And then we need a big goal. He scores in 30 seconds. It's the manager. It's the greatest player of all time. And it's one of his greatest ever goals. And you just think, what's going wrong here? And then, of course, they beat us at Anfield, which hadn't happened. It wasn't up to that. They beat us in 84, I know. But yeah, so that was
they were a really good team back then, but weren't they?
It's still underrated.
Yeah.
It's weird if you think about it now out of context where, City, the enemy, and it was Chelsea once and what have you. I think the Everton side of the mid-80s is one of the greatest football teams I've ever seen. Absolutely, seriously, honestly, they were incredible. The Kendall side, when they came to Anfield, it was when I was saying before, what happens if you lose this game? I've never thought of that before. You thought about it on Derby Day. There's every chance. Right from the second that Graham Sharp scored that goal against us at the Annie Road end, you think these lads, they can bother us. And it's harder because I've got to go to college with these sods the next day. And, for the first time ever in our adult life, Everton were a genuine threat. And not only were they a genuine threat, suddenly they pulled out their greatest ever side. It is today. I think it's still their greatest ever side.
Yeah, it's hard to argue, isn't it? It was a side that, could have gone on. If Liverpool hadn't been the team they were, Everton could have won a lot more. They were unfortunate.
They could have won the double. They should have won the double. Well, that's as simple as that.
That's it. It was a year that obviously Liverpool do the double that year, and they beat Everton in the FA Cup final. But it could have gone the other way. It could easily have gone the other way, as you said.
I remember the week before we played Chelsea thinking, I'll take one each.
Yeah.
And the cup was just as big as the league in those days, because we hadn't won it since 74. And it was just, and it meant something. The FA Cup meant something in those days. And I remember thinking, one each. And then, of course, we win the league. And then you think, maybe not one each. I like it better if we win both now.
Yeah.
And to get past that side, to go on the run we did, because, again, I've said this to Mike recently, that was not a great Liverpool side. The 85-86 side, we got through purely on sort of vapours and muscle memory. We know what to do to win the league. And Everton won the league the year before, and therefore Rush went mad. We had Jan Mulby's, and we got a lot of penalties, and I won't lie about that. And Jan got was a cult hero in those days, and penalty goal, and he was just, his was the first name sang on the cop in those days. I can remember as well.
Had he only signed that year, or was he the year before?
It was the year before. He came in under Fagan, but this was his year when he really kicked
into the team. Yeah.
And I agree with Macca, by the way. Imagine if they weren't drinking. What a side they would have been.
Yeah, it's true. Like when you think about it, it's one of the, people level it in the 80s that Man United had their drinking culture, and Everton, Liverpool had it as well, but Liverpool were winning, so they were getting away with it a bit more. But that Everton team, it was a hard team, wasn't it? It was Peter Reid was a tough player in midfield. They had Graham Sharp, they had Lineker, Gray, all these guys throughout the 80s that were just tough teams.
Bracewell was a fantastic
very
player.
Unlucky with injuries, but wasn't he?
And he lost 4 cup finals in his career.
4 cup finals.
4 cup finals. And what a player he was as well. Gary Stephen, Trevor Stephen.
Yeah.
And
Neville Southall.
No one liked the greatest man in the world. Everyone likes we liked him even then. Yeah. And you just look at that side, and there was no weakness. Who'd you attack there?
Yeah,
maybe Pat Van Den Hel.
Yeah,
and he was playing.
But he was a tough player, Pat Van Den Hel. He
was filthy. Yeah,
he was a dirty player, wasn't he?
Absolutely was.
It's something that myself and Gav, we done this show last week, and we both sort of were saying that our earliest memories of Liverpool fandom would have been 86, the cup final, and then 87, 88 was when we sort of really remembered as kids watching Liverpool. But you're obviously at the coalface of all this sort of thing. You're going to games then. You said that 85, 86 team wasn't great. Does it improve the following year? Or is it a case of 87?
87 for me, from what I can remember, had the hangover of Rush going. We all knew Rush was going. And that was in, I mean, Everton won the league. Everton won the league on the last day, but my emotional memory of that was Everton were always going to win the league. They were just better than we were. You know, we'd lost the League Cup final. Rush lost his record a bit of scoring, and Liverpool winning. Liverpool losing happened for the first time, and then happened again straight afterwards. Norwich, I think. So I can remember things like that, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast. It's ridiculous. And but 87 wasn't a happy season at all. But then, you know, 87, 88, we're all gutted because Russia's gone, and then suddenly the world goes mad. It's still a season. It's still a season.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah, that's what and if it's someone asked in the chat earlier, what's your favourite ever Liverpool team? Is it this team? And we had this discussion, me and Gav, when we'd said 87, 88 was always the benchmark for us, even as kids, until now. But do you still rate that 87, 88 team as the team?
No. 78, 79 is the greatest Liverpool side I've ever seen.
You see, I wasn't even born, so I'm taking a swerve on that.
I wasn't going. From
everything I know and reading and looking back, that was a phenomenal side, wasn't it?
That's Liverpool's greatest midfield.
You've Terry McDermott and you've
Souness, Ray Kennedy and Jimmy Case.
Yeah, I mean, it has everything really, doesn't it? I know we're going back in time here again, but it does have everything. If you can name me a tougher midfield than that, you'll be doing well, but that can play ball as well. You know, it's...
But on the Hansen side, if you look at that midfield, they're all goals, all of them, and 3 of them can tackle.
Yeah.
So, you know, and one of them, by the way, is the greatest midfielder in the world. I was still convinced. People talked about Platini in those days. No, Graham Souness is the greatest midfielder in the world.
Yeah.
And so that was just how I felt. That was just the 79 side was just, I mean, I was very, very young. I was 10, 11, but they were my heroes. I didn't even like David Johnson, and it didn't matter.
Yeah. David Johnson was the owner for you, was he not?
He played for Everton.
Yeah, that's it. Kieran is saying was soon as a good player, and I don't know if he's messing. But it seems that we're talking about him. How would you describe him? Like, I wrote that people know him as the commentator now or the pundit, but describe him.
I used to write for fanzines, and I remember I wrote an article once, and I said, so this was early on in Gerrard's career, and I said, if Steven Gerrard puts 100% into every single training session he does for the rest of his life, he might be 3/4 of the player that Graham Souness is.
Yeah,
that's how much I value Graham Souness. He was just... Ian Rush wrote 2 autobiographies. Obviously, they were all sorts of puff pieces because they were all ghostwritten and what have you. Yeah. And he said he remembers being at Portman Road once and they were a goal behind, and Souness gave the talk instead of Bob Paisley, and he said it was basically like having your big brother on the pitch. No one, if you got a kick off a centre half, you didn't get kicked twice. Souness would go and have a word with them, and I don't know if he's better than Gerrard as such, but. They're totally different players.
It's hard to compare the era, isn't it?
Like, you couldn't play Souness as number 10. No, that wasn't his game. He dropped back rather than went forward. Yeah. But you know, and Liverpool did go to a 3 occasionally. He just dropped deep, and that's where you push the fullbacks up. Yeah. But it was always his ball. Yeah. Always. And if anyone wants to Google Graham Souness and John McGovern, there's a great photo of him just holding John McGovern, who's a hard lad by the throat. At a game, and you're right, Kieran. He is a bit like Roy Keane, but with better passing. Yeah, and he scored the odd hat trick, and he had better hair.
That's the thing, isn't it? Like Kieran, I'm not picking on you. You know, you put a few comments in that he just from footage he saw, you thought he was just a hatchet man. He was so much more than that.
No. He was just he could pass, he could score. And you know, he was a bright player. I met him last year for the first time, and I've been saying for years. Obviously, he gets a lot of abuse because of the Sun stuff. Yeah. And I've been saying he is the player I want a pint with him more than anyone else, just to pick his brains. And he's an ambassador at the charity I work for, so I wangled a chat with him during a meal once, and he's absolutely lovely. He's a really, really nice man. Of course, I was shaking throughout the entire conversation. And I said this to Mike. It looks like he could play now. Yeah, he's absolutely whippet thin. You can I'm sure he still plays over. He runs. He definitely used to run and stuff because of his heart problems. Yeah, but he's a god to me.
Yeah, and a lot of people of that generation would be. Like I said, my parents sort of grew up in that era as well, and the son thing sort of tarnished them with a lot of people, didn't it? But I think, you know, he regrets that, and we all know he regrets that. And I think it's a lot of people have sort of not forgiven it, but have moved on from that. You know, Graham Souness, his name deserves to be mentioned up there as in the Liverpool sort of Hall of Fame, the Mount Rushmore or whatever you want.
He's top 5 for me. Always will be top 5.
Yeah, he's an unbelievable player, and a lot of the lads in the chat are putting it in there. You know, he was a hard man, but he controlled everything. He wasn't afraid, even when he got older and he was playing for Rangers. You know, he again as a player manager, similar to Kenny in 85, 86. Someone kicks a Rangers player, Souness is going looking for him, and he's I don't know what age is, he's 35, 37 or whatever at that stage, and he's getting stuck in. Like, you didn't mess with Graham Souness, and he was the man. And you're right, that 78-79 team is the one that's between them, the 87-88, and now the current team, they say are the ball playing best teams ever. I don't know how you rate the current team, but we'll go back to the 87-88 period. So, as you said, Rushie's gone to Juventus at that stage. All those brought in the January, I think, before, isn't it? He's in there, but he's not part of the real team yet. So they bring in Barnes, they bring in Beardsley, they bring in Houghton. That year, is it that it clicks for Kenny as well that season? The management lark. Is that what happens then as well? He's not playing anymore at that stage, is he?
Yeah, he's gone by then. Yeah, in fact, he plays the last game of the season, I think. I know that's 1990. He played 1990 last game of the season against Derby, and Derby away. And yeah, it just kicks in. Of course, we can't go to the Kop because the Kop's closed for the first 3 games. So we play Oxford first game of the season, and I'm so proud of this. I was the first person on the Kop that season.
There you go, claim to fame.
I queued up and I sprinted onto the Kop. I beat some other black coming down the top stairs. And then it was just like, it was like Liverpool plus. And by the time, like, you know, the end of the summer, like, you know, you go to night games and it's still light, but it gets darker throughout, and then like the floodlights come on. I said this recently on a podcast, an old man just turned to me and said, "This is like the 60s again, lad. This is like the 60s. It always used to be like this. You get a ground, you know, an hour early, because it's like you're rubbing your hands thinking, come on, let's go and have this again." There was no tension about, you know, are we going to lose this week? Are we going? It wasn't you. Are we going to, you know, are we going to do it this? There was no, we might win this. You know, let's get behind the team. It's literally come and entertain us, and that's what we did.
And we were talking about the team as well, and it's a different game nearly, isn't it? There's a squad of maybe 15 guys that year that are playing, and it's not like it is these days. But the team had everything, didn't it? 87, 88. You have Barnes, and Gav spoke about Barnes being his favourite player. What do you remember of Barnes at this time? You're going to the game, obviously. What's the mood around? Because I know there was a lot of racial stuff still in the air back then, even at Anfield. Was it something that you were aware of at that stage? Probably what, 8, 9 at this stage?
It was hypocritical. There was, I remember Mark Chamberlain, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's dad, playing for Sheffield Wednesday against us, and him getting some racist abuse. Yeah. And then the same play, people were singing Johnny Barnes the next 5, you know, a minute later. Yeah. You know, so that was going on a lot. And he was such an intelligent player, and when he spoke, you listened. Yeah. And he wasn't always a popular choice, because there was like, you know, is he going to go to Arsenal? Is he going to go to Spurs? There's a lot of that going on before the summer. People are saying, John Aldridge, he's played for Oxford and Newport United and Newport County, and now he's Ian Rush, and he was 28. Remember that he was old when he came to us. Aldridge was, and then suddenly, like, you put them all on the pitch, and it's like the big signing was Beardsley. It really was. 2 years beforehand, Beardsley plays against Newcastle for us. Drew 1-1. And at the end of the game, in his Newcastle kit, he runs over and applauds the Kop, as if to say, "See you next year, lads." And that was like nearly 2 years later. So when Beardsley turned up, I came to see Beardsley. I wanted to see Beardsley more than anything else, because he was a number 7, and he was next in the line. You know, Keegan, Dalglish. Now we've got Beardsley, and this is how it's going to be. And
you could tell, couldn't you, the type of player that Beardsley was the type that you wanted, that you knew was Kenny sort of heir apparent. Paul Walsh, it didn't work out with because of injuries or whatever. He could never take on that mantle, but Beardsley was the real deal. So Barnes sort of comes in under the radar, because Barnes is about 900,000 from Watford. Beardsley's 1.9 1.9, is that 1.8?
1.7, I think it was.
Well, yeah, around that. But he's the sort of the England.
No, you're right. It was
forward.
1.9. It was 1.9.
Yeah, he's the England forward. He's
the marquee signing. He's the one. He's the one the press turned up for. Yeah.
And that's what they just all click, don't they? They just all it just happens for them. They all just click from nearly from day one. Well, early on that season, and they just march on. It was an unbelievable season.
It's not. You've also got to consider, because he's very much overlooked. You've got to think about Steve Nicol as well.
Yeah.
Because Steve Nicol could play either role on full back. He could play up front when he wanted to. Yeah. There's that famous game at Newcastle away where he's basically playing. He's a left back, right back, central midfield, and he plays right and gets a hat trick as a defender. And he was just an immaculate footballer. And Tony Evans got a lot of stick recently on Twitter for saying that people will compare him to Maldini. He was getting laughed at for that. He was just amazing. Stephen Nicol was just an incredible footballer.
It's easy to overlook players of that era, like Maldini was the golden boy coming into the 90s or whatever. But
he's got better hair.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to say.
He just looks better.
And a lot of players maybe look better than Steve Nicol. And Steve Nicol had a reputation maybe for not being the sharpest person. When he took the penalty in '84, was it? He took the ball, and what's he doing? He wasn't even meant to be taking one. Yeah. He probably, that goes, when you look at someone and you think you shouldn't be a good footballer, or you're not.
He's from United.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's the great thing about, Andy Robertson these days, where you get all these people saying, we've got to buy Mbappe because he's brilliant and stuff like that. In those days, we bought people from United, from Northampton,
Falkirk, Oxford, as you said.
That sort of thing. Oxford and Newport, and Steve Nicol, United. Wouldn't think about him twice. I can't remember where Whelan's come from. Something, it was in Dundalk, wasn't he? Home Farm, that was it. He played for Home Farm.
I was coach at Home Farm currently.
Yeah, and it's a strange place to send a scout. I think if a European champions probably did, obviously. So
it's weird. There was a few guys came from Home Farm into Liverpool. I know Mark Kenny would have done it afterwards. Yeah. He went in '91 from Home Farm, and there was someone else around '83. I can't think of who it was. Staunton came from Dundalk.
That's right.
Yeah, it was, but there was, it was a pathway, as you said. You're looking at people nowadays on Twitter. You want, as you said, Mbappe, or you want Griezmann, or you want all these top players. But back then, Liverpool were winning things, and they were just bringing players in from the right player. It was the right player. It didn't matter the profile. It was the right player at the right time. And it was something they done regularly. As you said, they're bringing in Ronnie Whelan from Home Farm. They're bringing in Ian Rush from Chester. They're not marquee players. It was something I spoke to my dad about. Actually, I was going to do one on a show about something. Grizz, who does the shows, was asking me about when we won leagues in the 80s, did we strengthen that summer to build on that? And I had to speak to my dad about this, and we went through a season by season who Liverpool signed, and it wasn't the years they were winning the league that they were bringing in players. Very rarely. It was probably the years they didn't, like 87, 88, they have a bit of a splurge because they didn't win the league before that. And even I think 89, when Arsenal win the league, I think, did they buy Hussein the following summer? Like they bought big when they went.
Same played 88, 89,
yeah. So it's sort of it's a contradiction that you have to buy. I know it's a Premier League thing more so than a football thing, but the 80s goes on. You're going to the match quite regular now. When did you start sort of going to aways? Would that have been in the 80s, or would it have been later?
I later, to be honest, much later. I didn't do because I moved to London in '88. The late '88, October '88. So I'm going to the odd London game because I live in London at that point. So I used to go to West Ham. I went to Wimbledon. Remember that? It was much later I started going regularly to aways, and but of course in those days it's seaters and seater stadiums and stuff like that. So you got to plan a lot more. But no, so I've never a train going away game like if cars and things with mates. Yeah. Rather than
if it's in London, you'll go and you'll watch it. But it's funny you mentioned that, like West Ham, Wimbledon. What were they like to go to back then? as stadiums and as
I went
areas than other match
to.
day
I love
experience.
Upton Park. I absolutely love
Yeah.
Upton Park because it was horrible. And
Yeah.
I'm a bit weird like this because I absolutely love horrible grounds where you're not meant to feel welcome. That's the point of it, and I think that is the point of a football ground. It's welcoming for the home fan, and it's horrible for the away end. And I went to the League Cup game where West Ham were bottom of the league, and we were top by a mile, and they battered us 4-1, and Paul Ince played for them and ran us all over the pitch. And we're playing like Burrows and people like that, Gary Ablett, Mike Marsh, that sort of team. And what I remember more about that game than anything else was like they didn't have the fence up for some reason. And that was the first time, if you're used to standing behind the fence, when they take it down, you think, there's something missing here.
Yeah,
I'm not watching it through a grill, and I'm used to watching it through a grill, which is not too anything about it now.
Yeah.
But that was difficult. I went to Plough Lane, and just horrible. And I loved horrible grounds. I went to the New Den when we played. The Den as it was in those days with when Millwall were up for that season. And in fact, that's quite funny because my uni was you could get a job being a steward at Millwall, and like it's really. But that's it. All the northern people that do in my course went, fine, free football. Let's go. Don't fancy Millwall being a steward. Thanks. I might give that one a miss.
Yeah.
I didn't get that job actually. It was £3 a shift. And I'm talking like I'm down the mine or something. But that was great. But of course, it was all standing for that, so it wasn't that much of a difference. It's just that Liverpool occasionally played in a different kit colour, and it wasn't the Kop.
Yeah.
So whole lot different these days. It's much more sanitised these days, and rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough old gig back then, And again, you say that you feel like you're talking about so many years ago, and it's not that long. It's not that long ago.
No, I was at the Millwall Cup game in 2004-05, maybe the year after. And we won 3-0, and there's a supposed riot in the ground during the League Cup game, and that was horrible. That was just horrible. And that was the first time, they put over the Itano and say the away fans will be kept back for half an hour, and everyone's going, yeah, fine. Normally you can't wait to get away, but no, I'll stick back, thanks. I'm happy with that. I'll just sit down. Yeah, that wasn't a nice night. I was on what's the name of that gobshite? John Gaunt, the very, very right wing DJ thing, and there was all this stuff about Liverpool fans fighting in the ground and what have you. And this is 2005.
Yeah.
And I went on the next day and said, by the way, I was in London Bridge before that game where we were rioting. I was there for 2 hours. I was in the pub opposite, and nothing like that happened at all. And he started arguing, and I used the term "you're Stalinist revisionism" on your program, and he stopped dead because I'd used a polysyllabic word because he just wanted me to.
Expecting this.
He wasn't expecting a reasoned debate about it, and they got me off. But they put me on the news. I remember I've gone massively off topic here. I know.
No, that's what we're all about. You go wherever you want with this. We're all about this sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Don't be worrying about that. You go where you want to go with this.
They put this Liverpool fan on the news. This Liverpool fan said this. Oh my God, it's me. I think it's because they hadn't used the term Stalinist revisionism ever before. So
there you go. They wrote it down and and used it afterwards, I'd say. But Karl, this is your Liverpool life, so you can talk about whatever you want on this. If that's what you want to talk about, this is all about your experiences, and if it goes on a tangent, so before we move on, anyone that's listening, lads, if you are in the chat there, just give us a little like. Any new fans around, just give us subscribe. As ourselves, go on, share it, do all the good stuff. So we're back to yourself. So Karl, what area did you want to move on to? Because I know we're not going to go through each sort of. We'll be here till tomorrow if we go through each era. So into the 90s, what are your highlights of that sort of decade?
Highlights of the 90s. It was probably the 95 season, 95, 96. It was when Roy Evans took over from Suarez, really, and there was a big game where we just got Bab and we've got Ruddock and Scales, and someone's going to have to drop out of the midfield. I remember thinking, who's it going to be? Yeah. I hope it's Redknapp. And it was Redknapp. Because there just wasn't, because people were just running through us. Oh shit, we're just running through us all the time. And I was thinking, we want some hard lads in there. We really, really want some hard lads. Suarez went the other way, actually. Suarez just brought in hard lads, but no one who could play a ball. Yeah. And, Julian Dix and people like that. And that mid-90s side that went on to not win the league in 96 and 97, that was for the first time I'd seen Liverpool go from bad to good. Because growing up, it was just good all the way through. As Paisley famously said, I remember the bad times. One year we finished second. That was a bad year. But then we suddenly started dropping down. Yeah, this is the Spice Boys area and all that. And McAteer can talk about, we weren't like that at all. Our attitude was perfect. Neil Ruddock was playing that side.
Yeah.
Neil Ruddock was a disgrace as a Liverpool player. He was brilliant in his first season. I've got to say that. He really was. He's very much underrated for that. But, he's playing about the famous pass the pound game.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Liverpool, lads.
Yeah.
Take that back to Millwall. We don't do that here.
Yeah. But that's it. It's an attitude thing that you see. Man U have obviously moved away from that, and they're becoming successful. And Arsenal are not quite at the Arsene Wenger era yet, but there's change happening in the game, isn't there, in England? And Liverpool were just sort of left behind a bit. And when you have the likes of Ruddock there, and you have a culture, they were a great team actually. That era, it was a great team. The Spice Boys.
That's the most frustrating thing about it. I'll answer the pass the pound question then. Yeah. So it was a thing that I don't know if Ruddock started it, but basically, someone went onto the pitch with a pound coin in their hand, and by the end of the half, every time you'd run past someone or you celebrated or something or did anything with them at all, you'd pass a pound round, and whoever ended up with a pound at the end of the half had to pay for the drinks that night. It's Liverpool fucking football club, and you're doing that.
More session, isn't it?
And it came out a lot afterwards that had happened. But I remember Gary Neville said this on the worst TV program name I've ever heard, but it's a great show. It's Gary Neville's Soccer Box. That's an awful name for a TV program, but I really like it.
It's quite a good show. It's quite a good show, isn't it?
He had Fowler on, and he said that '96 side. He said you should have won the league, but I knew you wouldn't because I knew you were always out. And he said we still had a drinking culture, but no one across Ferguson. I'm not saying this is Roy Evans' fault or anything like that. He just said we just wised up a bit, because they had McGrath and they had like Blackmore and they had Robson, all heavy drinking lads. I said we just wised up a bit and just thought if we stay on this, then we will beat them. They will get tighter. Yeah. And this is I was going to say this before when you're talking about the drinking culture. Then I've read about Michael Robinson when he signed for Liverpool. He was met at a service station by Joe Fagan and Ronnie Moran, and they said, they were just talking through about, we'd like to sign you, we'd like what we'd do, etc. And he said, would you want to drink? So he said, yeah, I'd like a glass of water. He went, I can have a pint, I don't mind. And he signed at that point. Well, I can have a pint. You're the head coach. So okay, I can have a pint. And he did. And it was never mentioned at all. Yeah. That was the culture. So I think Neville was saying then, him and Phil Neville never drank, probably still don't. And, that's where Liverpool went behind a bit, is that.
Yeah. And it's a small thing, but it's spot on, They've their heads down and they're like, right, we're building something here. We know what's happening, but we're passing a pound on the pitch to see who's buying the drinks, as you say, most probably led by Ruddock. And it was just the one thing that held that team back because they were a great side, it was really exciting players.
We had everything. We absolutely, McManaman was absolutely fantastic. And what you want to think about him now, he just sounds so disappointed, McManaman. Yeah. It just sounds like someone's just like he's been locked out of a club that he really wants to go into. Oh, really? Watching this? It's only 6-0. He's got to be a bit disappointed with that. It's like, for God's sake, man.
It's a great point, actually, about McManaman because, again, touching on a lot of people that are younger, not only know McManaman as the pundit, and he's a bit of a laden mood, however, he drains the life out of everything. But as a player, he was a sensational footballer, wasn't he?
Couldn't shoot.
No, but he could run.
he could run it, put it on the penalty spot, and basically just pass it back to the keeper. He did score some great goals, of course he did. Yeah. The best example of that, by the way, is a former Liverpool player who is humiliated because he's been an absolute knob and was brilliant. Was Mark Lawrenson. Yeah. I cannot describe how brilliant Mark Lawrenson was as a player. He was phenomenal. Yeah. Please don't. Again, I'm talking about Mike a lot today, Mike Nevin, but he always says you've got to think there's Lawrenson and there's Loro, and they are two different human beings completely. Yeah. And Mark Lawrenson was just absolutely everything. If Mark Lawrenson was 24, you wouldn't see Joe Gomez again.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a great point because so many of the Liverpool players of those eras went into the punditry game, and you do build up an opinion of them, and so many of them, you're like, Loro, he couldn't have been a ball player. He couldn't have been good. He was hard as nails. He was tough, hard as nails, but could play football as well.
Even though he did dye his hair very early on in the 80s, and was reminded by the Copper at pretty much every home game.
Yeah. But like that, again, touching back on what I was saying about going through and asking my dad, like, about signings that Liverpool made, and he said Lawrenson was one of the big signings that they did make.
Expensive,
he was a big, expected to go into the first team, and it was one, it was a big. Where did he come from? Brighton or
Brighton?
The Brighton, yeah. So he came from there, and he was a really good player and a hard player. One of the best centre halves probably in the history of Liverpool, which does say an awful lot about him.
Yeah.
A lot of people just know Loro, does the predictions at the weekend and hasn't had Liverpool losing in 2 years or something.
Yeah.
Well, Loro, good lad. But, as a player, he was something else, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Now, the Spice Boys, for want of a better word, they just didn't help themselves with the white suits in the cup final and all. Everything just went against them. But they were a good team. And then that sort of breaks up. Houllier comes in. What did you make of the joint manager?
I thought it was the club being scared to let go of Roy.
Sentimental, wasn't it? Just
that's all it was. Make a decision. Just make a decision and do it. And that was the chairman. It's David Moore saying, "I don't want to sack my mate."
Yeah,
and it's right. I absolutely adore Roy Evans. I think he's been fantastic for the club. I've met his son a couple of times as well. He's a lovely lad. He's got exactly the same voice, which is quite scary. And Stephen, and knows everything. And Roy Evans was a hard manager, despite what people think. Yeah. If you got bollocked by him, you got bollocked by him. But the club just didn't want to cut ties completely and go all. People like Ian St. John went nuts when we had a French manager. Yeah, there was still a bit of element of that going on, which was incredibly stupid attitude to take. Yeah. And Houllier basically brought Liverpool up. It ended badly, but Houllier he was Arsene Wenger for us. He just said, right, firstly, you don't do that. You get fined if you do that. Don't think you're getting away with talking to me like that. We're not going to have that again. Fowler hated him, obviously. Yeah. Because Robbie did like to go out in town and stuff like that. And I think he's a great manager. I was really disappointed when Houllier went back into management from Aston Villa, because I work for a cardiovascular charity. Yeah. He just wasn't well.
No.
You could just tell us. I mean, the operation he had, I know, because I know a few surgeons. Lucky he made it. Very lucky. And he's a different player after, a different man afterwards.
Yeah, he really was. It's a great point, because it was a change. He sort of brought the modern Liverpool, which he didn't see the fruits of his labour. Right, he won the treble in 01, the cup treble, but he didn't manage to get them over the line in the league, even though they went close. But he set it up. He sort of moved them into that continental style that Rafa Benitez took on, and led. Right, we had a few duds. Then we had Roy Hodgson in between, but it leads us into Klopp and the current team.
We didn't have Roy Hodgson. That was a nightmare I had. Every time it didn't happen. I'm not having it.
Yeah, it was an awful period of the history, but we've eventually gone and won the big one now.
The big two.
We got Istanbul. We stroked Istanbul in 05, and then we won. But last season, you could tell it was different, wasn't it? It wasn't a trophy that was won and built on sand. There was a foundation laid there. To get a 27-point season in the league as well was phenomenal, and it just built up to this season. And it's different than what Rafa had. It's different than what Houllier had, and it's eventually got us back to that league title. It's been a long 30 years waiting on it. But before I move on to ask you a couple of your favourites, a few of the lads are mentioning Hansen in the chat there. What do you have on to say about Alan Hansen as a player?
The perfect offender. I don't like. I when on the Anfield Wrap, they used to have like a writer's page, and under my name it said "doesn't like ball playing centre halves." And when Hansen used to do this thing where he'd just drop his shoulder and go up the pitch, and it looked like he was going to lose at any second, but suddenly he's right on the penalty area. Yeah, just an absolutely fantastic player, an absolute dream centre half for Liverpool. And he never really got a song at Anfield, which is always a bit disappointing. Yeah. He did it. He had a little one, but it wasn't a big one. It was like, shouted every now and then. But
when you think about the likes of Daniel Sturridge would have loved the song. Listen, if Alan Hansen doesn't have a regular song, Danny, you know, they don't get given out willy-nilly, you know. Avo said it's good in his day as VVD. Would you agree with that comparison? Avo is good in his day as VVD is now. Would you agree with that about Hansen?
Different type of defender, I'd say. I think Virgil van Dijk has got to do at least another 7 years before he gets to Alan Hansen's stage. Just because Alan Hansen won so many medals. I'm not saying that's a talent thing. I think that's a longevity thing.
It is true, you know. It's longevity. I suppose the era, it's hard. You won't see many players staying as long at clubs as they would have done then. But to beat them sort of legends, you do have to put a bit of a shift in, don't you? And get the medals on the table. And at the end of the day, say, right, you have more medals, but mine counts for more, and then they can have the discussion at that stage. So before we go, Karl, right, and it's been great talking to you, because your experience at the match, you know, it's enlightening us that this is the third show we've done of this, and the first one was with a lad Stroh, and Stroh is sort of only in his 20s, I think, so his Liverpool life is a lot later. And then Gav's the same age as me as a kid in 87, 88, so you're even going before that, which is great to get that viewpoint in. And the lads in the chat, it's bringing a lot of memories back for them as well. So over all those years, who was your favourite Liverpool player?
Ray Kennedy, of course it is. I talk about Ray Kennedy every single day if I could. There's a lad called Andy Knott who Andrew Knott does he does the murals on the Kop. And the day we did one for Ray Kennedy, the Arsenal 4-4 game, we know there's a big number 5 on that. He's just summed it up perfectly for me. He said, Kenny was my favourite, but Ray was my hero. And I thought, my God, you know, when someone just sums up your entire life in one sentence, that's what that felt like for me. That is absolutely perfect. Yeah, of course Kenny's your favourite. Of course he is, because he's perfect. But Ray Kennedy was just my hero, just because he just looks so cool. You know, he's a bit scary, and he's a bit, you know, if you got tackled by him, you knew it. But he was one of the greatest players I've ever seen in my life, and I'm privileged to say I know him now. And I will still stand and talk to him and think the 10-year inside me, the 10-year-old me would say that's Ray Kennedy, and it's still it's my hero. Yeah, always will be my hero.
Yeah. That's brilliant, because like I said, my parents loved Ray Kennedy as well. So when I was growing up and you'd be watching, you know, the official history of Liverpool and all, me dad would be like, no, this is Ray Kennedy. You watch Ray Kennedy. Kennedy was mustard. He was the man. And it's weird because he was a centre forward when we bought him, wasn't he? He comes from Arsenal, centre forward, and he gets converted to the left hand side of midfield. Was he left hand side? But he was some player, wasn't he? He was just scored goals. He could do it all. He was just a great player.
It's the way he read the game more than anything else. I mean, as the great Peter Jones used to say, the commentator, he looks like he's playing in slippers. He just read everything perfectly, and he lays on the ball for Fairclough in 77 against San Etienne, which looks like a boot down the pitch, but it isn't. You know his favourite David Fairclough is going to be. I still maintain that he's taken the greatest ever throw-in Liverpool's history in Paris 1981, and he agrees with me. He's a very funny man, and he was just absolutely everything. And the same for when I met Suarez, I mentioned that in Ray, and he just shared me some stories with him, and he was telling his agent, like, you know, do you know what Ray Kennedy did for Liverpool? Do you know what he was like? And he said he was like 3 goals. You'd get like 10 or 12 a season, which midfield in those days was, well, the strikers got the goals in those days. And you know, and just because he'd been a forward himself, he'd won everything. He'd won the double at 20. Sadly against us, because he beat us in the 71 Cup final. And won absolutely everything in his life. And he did it all with Parkinson's disease.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like when you think about that. And Avo says how you met him. How did you meet Ray?
I wrote about him. For the fanzine, used to write through the Wind and Rain. And then I Googled his doctor, who wrote a book about him called Ray of Hope. And he put me in touch. He emailed me one day at work and said, if you want to talk to Ray, here's his number. He said he's happy to take a call from you. And I didn't do much work for the rest of that day. And we basically raised some money for him as well. We did an appeal for him a few years ago.
Great stuff.
Me and my mates, just to because he had to sell all his medals and stuff, so we managed to buy him. We bought him a new bathroom.
Yeah,
because his ability's still not great. Yeah, but he's doing a lot better these days.
That's good to hear, because it's very sad when you hear stuff like that. It's very, very very sad when you hear the players that get the medal hauls like that, because as you said, not even for us, he won the double for Arsenal. He's won an awful lot. He's got a lot of England caps and all that sort of thing.
So he won 17 caps because he's up against Trevor Brooking, and it's Ron Greenwood's the manager. He's great. Trevor Brooking's not going to drop him. But I can tell you what happened at that game in 2009, the 4-4 against Arsenal. So we agreed. The club, Rick Parry was actually really good to us. I've got to say that. He said, yeah, you can have the mosaic, and he paid for all the cards and everything.
Lovely.
And I got talking because it was Arsenal. We got ready down for the game, and I said, I got talking to some Arsenal fan groups, because I've been talking through the appeal and stuff, and said we're going to do a big mosaic for him with his shirt number, the big number 5 on it. And one of the lads said, well, can we have one? So he's the only player to have 2 murals at Anfield. So he has a number 10 with the yellow shirt with the blue number 10 on it. Yeah. My Handy would like to say that is the greatest number 1 because he designed the number 1 that day. We let him design it. And I can also tell you this talk about being modest. He wasn't supposed to go on the pitch at half-time because he said, I don't think people will remember me.
Yeah.
And he got out of the car 2 hours before the game started, and he took him about 10 minutes to get into the ground. Yeah. Absolutely mad.
But it's amazing, isn't it? Like the players of that generation, and Graham Souness would, if he was a bar of chocolate, he'd eat himself. It was very well documented that he loved himself. But you talk about Ray Kennedy or Jimmy Case, they're different beasts altogether, but they're just legends in Liverpool. And the thing about Liverpool fans, they do know they're legends, so it's no surprise that Ray Kennedy doesn't think he'll get recognised. It's amazing. Yeah. It's great. Yeah, Ray Kennedy, it's not a player that even you hear much, so I'm delighted we're talking about him, because a lot of people will go for the obvious shouts, King Kenny, they'll go for Souness, they'll go for Hansen, or the modern players, Gav went with Barnes, we'll get someone saying Gerrard, that sort of thing. So it's great to hear the player from left field, nearly literally from left field. But
I can also tell you that Ray said the greatest player in Liverpool's history is Steven Gerrard. To which I went, hang on, you were in the changing room with Souness and Kenny, and you went, yes, Gerrard.
Yeah, so they know good players when they say it, don't they? Yeah. If you played in that Liverpool team in the 70s and early 80s, you can tell a good player. Yeah. A question I usually ask for a bit of fun is, what's your favourite Liverpool kit? Is that something you're into? Is there an iconic kit that you remember? Is it one from your youth, or is it...
Can I show you?
So show me if you want to.
I've just bought the shirt, hang on.
Good man. It's what I love. I love all this.
I've just knocked a guitar over doing that, but okay.
Yeah. There you go. Right, there's having more foil on the back of it, does it?
Look at that badge, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah. It's quality, absolutely quality.
Love
and what was that, 79? Was that what that?
That was 79, yeah.
Yeah. It's an iconic kit, isn't it? It's again, the first player that comes to mind when I say that is Ray Kennedy. Surprisingly, even though
I take 76 as well with just the white band and just the liver bird.
Yeah,
but a very, very gold liver bird. And it's basically that without the word Hitachi on it.
Yeah,
I don't think we've done any better than that.
Yeah,
and it's a proper red as well. It's proper red.
Nice colour, nice shade. Everything about it is just right, isn't it? It's an iconic kit. And another one,
Kevin, I can tell you that the guitar is okay. I do that 3 times a day.
It's well used to getting knocked over, is it?
It really is.
Good stuff. Another one, your favourite game over those years, Carl. What would be your favourite you've been to? Your favourite you've been to?
The game I've ever been to was the 89 Cup final against Everton, for obvious reasons. Yeah. I was in the Everton end as well, and we went through the mill that day. And it was, because of Hillsborough and everything, it was a sense of relief. We'd won we hadn't won the cup, and then suddenly we were winning it twice in 4 years or whatever it was, 86 and 89, and big emotional day. And also, I just moved to London as well, and we were playing up the road. So that was quite nice. So I was at the Forest 5-0 as well, I should say.
Yeah.
And I was at the Palace 9-0. And I'll tell you something about the Palace 9-0 was half time, it was 9-0, and everyone around me said this is going to be 10. we just got a feeling. It's really weird. Everyone around said, sometimes it's like when I was at Wembley for the Wimbledon Cup final. Everyone around me said, "Oh, they're just going to miss this penalty." We just knew, you just feel it sometimes.
Yeah, you could sense
it. Everyone knew Palace was going to be at least 10-0.
Yeah, 10-0. Jesus Christ, you get spoiled, don't you, for these things? But it's funny you mentioned that. Me and Gav spoke about that game as well. The Everton game. What was your sense of that? We were saying you got the sense that it was Liverpool won it, and the FA Cup took on a huge importance that year. Liverpool lose the league to Arsenal in the last game, but with everything that happened with Hillsborough, it's nearly like the FA Cup took on more significance. Now we're probably looking at that with nearly romantic tinted glasses, but the fact that you're playing Everton in the final, was there a sense of the FA Cup? Obviously they want to win the league, but was there any sense that the FA Cup had taken on that sort? I know it was a big thing back then, and anyway, but had that?
Well, a lot of us didn't want to play it, didn't want to be in the competition. But because Everton had got to the final, we thought it seems right that we get to that we play this.
Yeah.
And let's talk about people winning it for the 95 as it was in those days.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a case of that. It was a case of it was really important. It was Everton. It just it had been anyone else, it wouldn't have been. It would have just been a game. But that was a United City. It just felt like that. Again, I was in the Everton end. I had one incident, but it wasn't a bad one. I got told by Blue beforehand when he saw my scarf that if we score, if I celebrate, he'll kill me. And I said, no problem, I'm not going to disrespect you. I said this on the Anfield Wrap recently. And I said, no, I'm not going to celebrate. We scored in 4 minutes. I went fucking berserk. At the end of the game, he shook my hand.
Yeah. And
got to give him that.
Yeah, it's the emotion, I suppose, of the day, isn't it? And it was one that, as you said, you've been to the 9-0, you've been to the Forest 5-0, but that just has everything, the emotion around it, and a great game as well. A great game on the day.
I wish it wasn't quite so great, because we won it 3 times and then started to hang on at the end. That's what it felt like anyway.
But like that, Everton, as we said, they were a great team in that day, back in those days. And
Stuart McCall, very good.
Stuart McCall comes out of nowhere, really, doesn't he? Makes a name for himself in that.
Scores 2 games. 2 goals.
Great player. So listen, Karl, we'll leave it there. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and it's been great to hear about experiences going to the games and just reminiscing about some great players and some great Liverpool teams. So this has been your Liverpool Life, Karl. Do you have, before I let you go, do you have anywhere do you still do the Sherlock Holmes stuff?
I'm doing I'm doing a podcast called Sherlock from Adler to Amberley, where we're examining all 56 of the Sherlock Holmes short stories in order, and I've got some big Sherlock type guests coming up quite soon, which I mean nothing to nobody, but I'm incredibly excited by that. I basically got the Ray Kennedy to Sherlock Holmes world. My next guest is a man called Trevor Downey. Would you believe? We've got him and Neil Poole on because they're both English teachers.
Great stories podcast.
And they're not massive Sherlock fans, but they know about stories. So I want to get them on to talk about how the construction of the stories. I also write a weekly blog, not about Liverpool, called Some Green Grass and a Ball, where if you want to read, I've just done something on Jack Charlton's time at Middlesbrough, for example, which is actually something I've been planning for a while before he died. And if you want to go and read about things like the battle, the shame of Gijón, where West Germany drew 1-1 with Austria in 1982 to keep someone else out to keep Algeria out of the. They basically stitched up Algeria in the World Cup group, about the most violent football games ever, about the smallest league in the world, about the worst football team in the world, which is Micronesia's under-23 sides. It's really, really niche stuff.
This sounds like the sort of stuff I love. So
and I'm really pleased. A mate of mine said recently, because it's not just me. Trev writes occasionally as well. Stephen Scragg writes about it as well, and really, really, it's just stuff like things like Robin Friday. Do you know about Robin Friday?
Yeah,
the greatest football he never saw.
Was he Cardiff?
Cardiff and Reading, yeah. Who once turned up at a team meeting naked carrying a goose. A very, very strange man. So it's an incredibly niche site, and to be honest, I haven't got that many followers for that, so I really want a big noise about that. We're really, really pleased with it, though.
Let's get that up and running. And we have so you can follow Karl on Twitter there at the Sensi, and check our feed for Karl's piece on Jack Charlton. So with that, we'll start looking at other bits, because we love all this niche stuff. And I know Shawnee Lawson, who'll just be on this pod, has introduced me to Magico Gonzalez, who played for Cadiz and El Salvador. And
now we're talking. Yeah, that's the sort of thing I'm into. Yeah.
Rabbit hole on El Salvador players. A player that Maradona thought was a head case because he trained at Barcelona once, but was too much of a madman. So I
want to talk about Garincha, who had sexual relations with a goat.
There you go. This is where we're at. This is what we want to talk about. Forget about.
We can imagine me going to the Anfield Wrap and saying, "Robbo, any chance I can whack in a piece about Garincha this week?"
There you go.
I wouldn't. I'd be defenestrated, I believe the term is, at some pace.
Good stuff. So listen, everyone, you can find Karl on that and much more. As you said, the Anfield Wrap, everywhere you'll see Karl, and his stuff is brilliant. I love listening to you on everything I've heard you on, and we hope to have you on again. And it's really been a pleasure having you on here today.
I can do a second hour.
You know what? I'd let you, but my young one is out there trying to get in, and I'm not letting her. She has to learn a lesson to bring her kids with her. But you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll get you on for part 2 another time, where we'll talk.
Yeah, let's do the 2000s next.
The 2000s and the 2010s. We'll get you on for that if you're happy to come back. Listen,
absolutely.
An absolute pleasure. Again, thanks for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening tonight. We've been the Fatback Four, and this has been My Liverpool Life with Karl Coppack.